Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this BM13 Katyusha, or Stalin's organ. No, not that organ. This is a 15mm or 1/100th scale snap-together plastic kit made by Zvezda. The back of the box is a little bit unusual for a Zvezda kit in that the images of the model are painted. Normally they are unpainted, not that that's a problem at all. The rest of the information you would expect to see on one of these boxes is of course present. The length is 6.5 centimeters, there are 26 parts, and there's a website from which you can download the card for the war game, that being Art of Tactic. Inside the box we find these two dark green sprues containing all the parts you'll need to make the Katyusha. The parts here are quite decent looking. The frame parts that will hold the rocket rack on the back of the truck body are pretty nice. They're quite thin, which I'm a little bit surprised by. In cheap kits in this scale, parts like these are often chunky and oversized. Understandably, it's to stop them from breaking, but these look relatively fine. The rest of the parts are pretty decent too. There are mold lines, and why wouldn't there be? It's not surprising at all. Fortunately, they won't be too hard to remove, so it's not really a big issue. I would say the detailing on these parts here is reasonable. It's not hyper-detailed. As I usually say, if that's what you're expecting in this kind of kit, you're doing it wrong. That said, the detail, like on the Radiator Grille on the front of these trucks, is looking quite good. No decals are included in the kit. What is included is this sheet of paper. On this side it talks about Zvezda's game Art of Tactic, and on the other side has the instructions themselves, which are simple enough to understand and follow. I start the build by attaching this framey bit to the bottom of the rocket rack. Please insert "nice rack" joke here. I started with the right side frame part, though I suppose it doesn't really matter which one you start with. Then I attach the central elevation pole thing part, which I did incorrectly initially, though I didn't realise it. I attached the other frame part. It did take a bit of pressure to get these parts to go together properly, but that's kind of normal with a snap kit. You see, the friction is what holds it together. It's not a problem really, and the parts do go into place eventually. I add glue so they stay that way. Can you spot the mistake I've made? If you can't, the issue is the pole in the middle which should control the elevation of the rack. On the real thing, not this model. Elevation is fixed on this model. Anyway, that part is in the wrong spot. It should have been further forward, and the central cross support bar thing is blocking it from being moved into the correct position. I pulled it apart and put it back together correctly. Fortunately, the glue wasn't entirely bonded. Moving along, I attached the rockets. This is pretty easy and doesn't look too bad at all. All of the rockets are connected by a flat bar part, which makes it much easier than attaching them one by one, though it does look a little bit less realistic. Again, I add the glue so that it stays there. There are only rockets on the top rails for this. Unless I'm mistaken, there should really be a set along the bottom too. Maybe we can explain it away as the bottom row of rockets having been already fired. I don't know how plausible that is, but oh well, that's my story. Anyway, that's the Katyusha part of the vehicle built. Now for the truck bit. I start this by attaching the rear wheel axle bogie thing, which easily slots into two of the mounting holes on the frame. Unsurprisingly, it does take a bit of pressure to get the parts to go together properly, and then I test fit the rear mudguard part, just in case the axles are in the wrong spot. I did also end up trimming the tops of the mounting pins for the axle part so the mudguards would fit better. And then I add glue to make sure everything stays together. Then I add the front axle and suspension part. This goes into place easily, and I don't think it matters which way around it goes, though I could be wrong, so do be careful. It doesn't take too much pressure to get this part to fit nicely. I add glue and it should stay right there. If it doesn't, I'll be sad. Next, why not add the wheels? That should increase the vehicle's mobility quite a bit. The rear wheels are made up of two parts. If you can't see the way I've glued them together, consult the instructions. That's what they're there for. These look very good. The wheels are then ready to be glued into place, on the axles, as you might suspect. They do need a bit of pressure to get them all the way onto the axles, and you should be careful while doing that. If you press too hard, you run the risk of bending or damaging the axles and frame part. It's not the strongest. The front wheels, being single pieces that require no assembly, can also be glued on at this point. I suggest you be even more careful with these than the rear wheels. The axle part has a long thinnish section that bends upwards and could easily bend or break. Once I realised that, I put my knife behind the part while applying pressure, to stop the bending. Then I glued on the rear mudguard part. That's pretty simple and it fits very well. I think this looks fairly good. It's never going to be accused of being over-detailed, but the underside here looks better detailed than the Battlefront offering. There's axle and differential box details here, which is not really necessary, but a nice touch anyway. The Katyusha needs a cab to unlock its full potential, so let's build that. I start by gluing the roof and rear wall part to the side door and windscreeny part. This is very simple. The guide pins are, obviously, very helpful, as is pressure. You want to minimise the gaps as much as possible. Then comes this bit, which is not an engine, it's just a frame for the engine compartment exterior. I glue on the bonnet or hood or engine lid or whatever you want to call it, which fits very easily. The engine bay sides come next. These have some nice vent details on them, and there's nothing too tricky in putting them on. The last part here is the Radiator Grille. This looks quite nice, goes on easily, and has very convenient headlamps already installed. Those are small and would have been quite fiddly to install on their own. Gluing that assembly to the frame is the next logical step, so I do that. Would you be surprised to learn that this is easy? No? I didn't think so. This box then goes into place behind the cab. I don't know what it's for, either something related to the elevation mechanism or a stowage box. Maybe for vodka. Either way, it goes on nice and easy. And finally, the Katyusha assembly goes onto the rear of the truck. There are 3 guide pins that this mounts into, and it's not hard to install, though I'm quite sure that if you applied too much pressure here, you could easily damage the parts being that they're so thin. So maybe try some caution. And that's the Zvezda snap together Katyusha in 15mm scale completed. I did recently build the Battlefront version too, so let's compare them. The Battlefront model is on the right in the slightly different green colour. I think they are both good models, though the detail on the Battlefront one does stand out a bit more. It may be a little bit chunky for some, though I don't have a problem with it. They are more or less the same thing, and pretty much the same size as each other. That said, they do have a few differences, which might be obvious, but I'm going to point some of them out anyway. The Zvezda kit has rockets only on the upper rails, while the Battlefront offering has rockets on the upper and lower rails. The engine compartment on both models are slightly different shaped. The one on the Battlefront model is a bit bigger, but the headlamps are smaller. The Zvezda kit lacks the blast shields over the front windscreen that the Battlefront kit has, and the frames holding the rocket rails up look very different on both kits, though they are both nice with fairly fine bars. The Battlefront kit also has these support legs at the rear. So, as you can see, while they do look fairly similar, they are different. I'm not going to tell you which one to buy, but maybe if you're looking to buy one of these kits over the other, this little comparison is helpful. Personally, I would be fine having both of these on the same table alongside each other. The real decision, in my mind, is how many Katyushas you need, and which kit you can find cheaper. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this model. It looks like a Katyusha, which is the entire point of it. It's reasonably well detailed, obviously it's not designed as a display kit, and it is in 15mm scale, which is quite small. So it's not unreasonable that some detail is omitted. It's still a good model, and should look rather nice with the application of some paint. Being a snap-together kit, the assembly was quite easy, and even though glue isn't needed, I do prefer to use it. Tamiya Extra Thin works very well for this kind of model, because you can let it seep into the parts that are already pressed together. I can't see any reason to take the kit apart once it's built, but I'm sure there are people who do that. Anyway, the build was rather quick and relatively easy. The only issues I encountered were caused by myself not paying attention to what I was doing, like when I glued the elevation rod thing in the wrong position. What a ding-dong. I built this model live on stream, and because there isn't a whole lot to the kit, I was able to get it built in a single session of a couple of hours. If you are not streaming, filming and taking notes, I would think that you could get this kit together very quickly indeed. You could most likely have a whole swarm of them built in an afternoon. If you want to see me build models live on stream, head on over to twitch.tv/Herbert_Erpaderp or follow the link in the description. I would love to see you in chat. So, what do you think of this Katyusha kit? Have you built it before? What about the Battlefront version? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. And of course, if you found this video helpful or interesting, I would certainly appreciate it if you shared it with your friends and anybody else you think might enjoy it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, follow, ring the bell, become a member or patron, and all the other things you do on YouTube and social media. Links to all of those things, including Patreon and my Twitch channel, are in the description below. And as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other, and thank you for watching. Farewell.